Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. Today, the Council will receive an update on the 2021 General Assembly session, especially on police reform and environmental issues, as well as an update on the House operating budget. This is an opportunity to learn the status of issues the Council is interested in or has taken a position on. We don't have any votes scheduled for today for the legislative session. I do want to thank Central staff and OIR for working on this great packet, and I'll turn it over to Carolyn Chen to take us through the packet.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Hucker. I'm Carolyn Chen, Legislative Analyst with the Central staff. We will be getting an update on the legislative session as well as police reform package. In addition, very fun day, we'll be doing Climate Solutions Now Act of 2021. Just another note is that the bond bills have been passed in the House, and you did receive a copy of that, and we will give you an update once it goes through the Senate. Thanks so much.
You ready?
I think we're ready.
Okay. All right. So we have 4 bulleted items today. We have an hour to get through it, so we'll try and answer as many questions and do as thorough a presentation as we can, or that what you would like to hear from us. Update on the 2021 session. Well, today is crossover. What that means is that opposite House bills need to get across to the other House today in order to basically be taken seriously by the other House, but they have time to consider them. So there was a rush of activity at the end of last week, and also sessions over the weekend and sessions that started at 10 o'clock in the morning to make this deadline happen. So that means there's 3 weeks left in the session. So we have some big issues still outstanding, of which 3 actually are on the agenda today. And we'll go ahead and start, if you want, with how the House and Senate police reform packages compare to one another. Just so you know, I mean, both packages have crossed. We've talked about this. We talked about it 2 weeks ago, but now we have kind of down to crunch time to get these packages, of which in some areas are very, very different, reconciled. And after spending a lot of time comparing these great big bills to one another and writing up the information that we provided for you, Maryland Matters this morning comes out with a pretty comprehensive and good summary of the differences in these 2 packages. But this is what's reflected in the package that we sent you on Friday, are the comparisons that Kathleen Boucher, who's on the call, me and Ed Lantner worked on together. So if you're ready, we will just start walking through the package, and if it's too slow, let us know. If it's too fast, let us know. And so we'll just go from there.
Sounds reasonable.
Okay. So actually on the actual memo that we sent, it gives kind of a good overview of kind of where we stand, but lots of bills. So the House ended up passing one big bill, House Bill 670. Everything that they were interested in doing is in just one bill, and it includes a number of items that are not in the Senate package. The Senate passed 8 or 10 separate bills, so this is going to be some kind of an effort to try and reconcile this package. So we're looking forward to how they approach this problem. So the first piece that we wrote about is the disciplinary issue, the repeal of the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights. And Kathleen and Ed, I will turn it over to the 2 of you. Or not.
Sorry, Mel, I was on mute. Thank you, Mel. So last time we discussed the Senate package and started off with a real overview and sort of then looked for guidance from the council president and council members as to how much detail to go into. So we'll kind of follow that model. So just quickly on the LEOBR and disciplinary process, when we talked about the Senate package, we talked about the fact that the Senate bill that repeals and replaces the LEOBR, to be simple about it, relies on the chief to supervising an internal investigation, and ultimately for the chief to make a decision about whether to charge an officer and a recommended discipline. And an officer then has a choice. Does the officer accept the chief's decisions or appeal to a hearing board? And that hearing board is made up of a law enforcement officer of higher rank and 2 civilians. That hearing board only makes findings of fact and recommends discipline, and then the chief had the final authority regarding discipline. So just with that background in mind, the House bill, it's almost not accurate to say a comparison, because they're just really absolutely totally different bills and different ways of approaching this. As you saw in the packet, the House bill creates 3 new entities that would be involved in the investigatory process, in addition to the chief and a local law enforcement agency, or a law enforcement agency. And the first entity it creates is an entity called the Police Accountability Board, which is actually not just related to discipline. It's something like the commission that's already been established here in Montgomery County. That's the membership would actually be established by local legislation, and it would have it's required to meet regularly, and it's required to discuss policing matters with police officials, kind of coordination, and then also it has a role of receiving complaints itself and receiving them, but not investigating them, not making decisions about findings of fact or discipline. And it also has the responsibility of appointing civilians to the 2 entities I'm going to discuss now. So under the House bill, a law enforcement agency does conduct an investigation, but there's very little said about that investigation. And then the bill says the law enforcement agency turns those investigatory files over to what's called an administrative charging committee. And that charging committee is made up of 5 members. It's the chair of the Police Accountability Board. It's 1 civilian selected by the Police Accountability Board. It's the county attorney, in our case, the lead lawyer in a jurisdiction, and then it's designees of the state's attorney and public defender. So once the law enforcement officer, the chief, turns over investigatory files to the charging committee, it reviews those files. Apologize, I might go down now. And if I lose battery, you can jump in, and then I'll come back on. It investigates the files. It reviews the files. If it feels like there's more investigation necessary, it can ask the LEA to do more. It has subpoena authority, but ultimately this charging committee does what the Senate bill gives to the chief. The charging committee will decide, will do some findings of fact and recommend discipline. And if an officer doesn't agree with that, they can again appeal to a trial board. In this case, the trial board is 3 members. In this case, it's an officer of equal rank, not higher rank, and a civilian appointed by, again, the Police Accountability Board, and an active or retired administrative law judge. So the trial then occurs, and the trial board's final decisions about finding of fact and discipline are final. They can be appealed to the circuit court, but it's final. There are a lot of other details that are different. One significant one in terms of discipline is that an officer can lose his or her pension as a part of the disciplinary action. And if they're convicted of a felony, perjury, or another misdemeanor relating to truthfulness and veracity committed in the course of performing official duties. So there are a lot of other differences. In terms of expungement, you may recall that the Senate bill allowed expungement if the chief found that the complaint unfounded or unsustained, or if the hearing board acquitted or found the officer not guilty, then after 3 years, all the records could be expunged. The House bill expressly says no expungement, prohibits expungement. The House bill makes some significant changes to the membership of the Police Training and Standards Commission and the duties and responsibilities of that commission. There's a very interesting difference on the effective date. The House bill is, this part of the House bill is effective, it's delayed by a year. It's effective July 1, 2022. The Senate bill is effective immediately upon enactment. You may recall that the Senate bill for existing collective bargaining agreements that exist on the effective date of the act, they continue to exist until they expire. This has a similar provision, except that the bill passes this year. It's not effective until July of next year, and it will allow collective bargaining agreements that have been entered into before July 1 of next year to continue until they expire. I think those are many of the key provisions of the bill. Ed, would you like to jump in on anything in particular that I missed?
There was just one thing I was going to add, which is unique to the House bill. It requires the Police Training and Standards Commission to adopt this, call it a disciplinary matrix. And as I read it, it requires all the law enforcement agencies to adopt this disciplinary matrix. And when the Administrative Charging Committee reviews the investigation and they decide, if they decide, okay, we have a violation here, they have to recommend discipline that is within the disciplinary matrix, which I take to be sort of like sentencing guidelines. And then the chief could increase the discipline, but must still stay within the disciplinary matrix. So you lose a measure of local control, I guess, in terms of the discipline to be meted out. On the other hand, I guess you consider it nice to not have to worry about that. It's been taken from you and it's being set out by the state and pushed down to all the different law enforcement agencies. That's a new concept. I just wanted to mention that.
Mr. President, if there are no questions or on discussion on that bill, shall we move on?
Councilmember Reamer has a question.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to thank Melanie and Kathleen and Ed and everyone who helped prepare this packet. I hadn't seen the Maryland Matters article yet. I'd be surprised if it does a better job than what you've done here. And it's important to lay this information out for the public because what we've seen thus far has not been clear at all, in the public domain. So thank you. Secondly, either of these bills would be a big improvement from the status quo in Montgomery County, where disciplinary matters, are referred to an arbitration panel if the officer chooses that. And as a result, really, you have a labor arbitrator deciding discipline, which is nationally now very clearly identified as a very bad practice that has led to all kinds of problems around the country with officers not facing discipline in a timely manner and chiefs not being able to impose the standards that they seek to uphold for their department, which is really what this is all about, is for the community to have standards and community values embedded in policing, and for the chief to have policies that enact that and have the community able to hold officers accountable to that. I guess I just wanted to hear if, I'd be surprised if the county executive had a view on these yet, but I would like to know if he does, that'd be fine. I'd like to hear it, but generally I'd be interested in hearing the thoughts of the chief and Ed Latner about Ed, you are the county attorney's, lead, as I understand it, generally on these issues. So, I'd appreciate hearing what you think about these alternative approaches. And the county has a lot riding on this, so I think we need to consider whether we want to weigh in one way or the other on which bill we prefer for whatever that might be worth. But it's hard to it's hard for me to imagine things that make a bigger difference in this, in policing policy than what disciplinary procedures we have. So with that, I wouldn't recommend we do that today. I'm certainly not prepared to do that today, but I thought it would be helpful at least to just hear some feedback from the chief and from Ed.
I'll just say these are both very different than what we have, but they're both very different from each other. So it's a lot of policy about how you want to go about the process of disciplining police officers. The Senate bill, I guess, is closer to what we have, only in the sense that there's still an internal investigation, and internally the chief then makes a decision, offers discipline. It can be appealed to a hearing board. The hearing board makes a decision that is binding on the chief in terms of guilt or innocence, and a recommendation as to punishment. The House bill is more different, and it establishes, as Kathleen was mentioning, a lot of new entities. So you have, you still have an internal investigation, but it's turned over to this administrative charging committee composed of, the county attorney, the state's attorney, public defender, and they make a determination of guilt or innocence, whether it's founded or sustained or not. And again, another thing that's different is this disciplinary matrix that is pushed down from the state across to all the law enforcement agencies, that, like, I liken it to sentencing guidelines. It says what the punishment's going to be for the different crimes. You again have a trial board, but the trial board is composed, again, they're similar. They both have civilians on them. But the trial board is the final word under the House bill altogether. They're just two very different ways of dealing with disciplined police officers.
Does the matrix, is that included in the legislation, or is that just that there will be a matrix, and that did you have a view on the appropriateness of what the matrix contains?
Yeah, it does. It just says that the state commission will adopt a model uniform disciplinary matrix for the use of each law enforcement agency in the state. Each law enforcement agency shall adopt the uniform state disciplinary matrix. Doesn't say much else about it except that that's what's going to govern. I guess it depends upon your view. You lose some measure of local control in terms of what you think what punishment is appropriate for a crime. You might like not having to worry about that. It's been taken away from you, so you lose that discretion. If they wanted to achieve uniformity throughout the state, I guess that will do it. But that's a new concept. Also, another thing in the House bill is, I think there's one hearing board and one administrative charging agency for all of the law enforcement agencies within the county. The sheriff and I don't know, Park and Plain, Rockville City, the others. That's also a new concept. So not good or bad, just a different way of doing this. And as Kathleen mentioned, the House bill is chock full of all the other things. I mean, from search warrants to use of force, it's your all stop shopping.
Okay. Chief, anything you want to add?
Yeah, so good afternoon. What I would add, I think the Senate bill, it makes it a lot clearer of a process. I think it also gives the authority of discipline to the chief or sheriff or any department. And I think when, you have chiefs such as myself who are accountable to this community, and it is our responsibility to hold our officers accountable for the things that they do. I think that the Senate bill is clear that it gives the chief that authority. In the House bill, it does not give that authority to the chief. And it takes that, it gives that to the group of folks that, again, it could be appealed on either end. But I think just by simply taking out the ability for me as the leader, or the chief of police as the leader of the organization, to provide accountability to the community and to the department, I think that's, to me, that's an issue.
So under the chief's, when the chief makes the decision, then the local elected officials say, Chief, we don't appreciate how you've approached this one, and we want you to, you're not going to have your contract renewed. That's the basic, the executive in that case would say, we think you're not doing discipline correctly, and so our accountability as elected officials is we're going to find a new chief. That's the way. Certainly I think that's an effective way for the system to work. I'm not saying it always works, but the other hand, you're saying this is a body that would be an enduring body, and it would be composed of these different individuals, and it's where accountability lies for a particular decision is not necessarily as clear. It is with a body, right? And that can have pros or cons. Like a decision goes the way that people don't, if the elected officials who are responsible to the community find that this isn't working, it's not clear exactly how you fix that.
And I would also add, as Mr. Ladner noted about the matrix, I think it does put it's a binding sort of an agreement, you might say, as to what the actual discipline is. When there's extenuating factors that can be considered on all cases that I think should be considered, what you're producing is a one size fits all for the entire state of Maryland. I think that I'm not saying I don't think that every police department standards wise are all built on the same platform. And I think that, you have some departments that hold certain things much more dear when it comes to certain disciplinary processes. When you say are events or offenses that an officer commits, again, I think that it's like a judge who has no, when he's faced with guidelines, he has little discretion about how he can go outside of those guidelines. And so I think that's a slippery slope from that perspective.
All right, thanks. I'll pass it back, but I just want to observe again, the discipline process that we have in the county now, the chief is not in charge. Frankly, in my opinion, nobody's in charge. It's the labor arbitrator who's in charge, and it's a profoundly flawed system. It doesn't produce results, and we need to fix it. And so, just want to make that point again in case folks are watching. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you to all involved in putting together this packet. To say that it really is helpful is true, but to say that this is really confusing is also true. It's really on one hand, but on the other hand. So could you please walk me through, Mel? Could you walk me through what happens now? We have two very different discussions going on. Is there a reconciliation meeting? How does that work?
So yeah, this is a very, very high profile issue for the General Assembly. So you think, oh, well, you see something like this happen and, oh, maybe it just doesn't get reconciled. I think that this package will get reconciled, and I'm not going to bore you with the details about how things like this get reconciled, but suffice it to say, I think that this one will go into a conference committee. So both sides will appoint, I believe that they will appoint conference committees. Unless they get in too much of a hurry, then they'll just work off of a package and try and get it to come together. But I don't know, and I do not know what the administration is thinking. I mean, I don't know how many people do know that. I would just say if there's any concern that anything would be vetoed here and the legislature would want to override a veto during the session, then they really need to have a package to the governor by, we believe, I think about April the 5th. So I anticipate there's conversations going on now, but I've not talked to anyone, any insider who knows exactly this is a big package, it's an important package, and there are differences, and then there's this package. This is special differences.
Yeah.
And again, high profile, high pressure. But I believe that there will be a package that gets reconciled and that something would move.
Well, and I believe that you're right. I had hoped that you're right. But that was my next question. What happens? So April 5th is the date that needs to be discussed, or that they need to come together. And then and you already answered the question about what happens if the governor vetoes it. So that's another possibility, and I don't know what that's going to be. And I don't know how much, Mr. President, you're going to get into the actual weeds of every part of this, but as an example, the provision on body worn cameras that I guess it's the House side that talks about, I guess both of them talk about body worn cameras, but one of them said that they have to have a provision that you count that it starts 60 seconds before it's actually turned on, and it can go back 60 seconds or something like that. I have to find the actual part of that. But do our body worn cameras that we have now, do they meet that provision if that part were to pass?
So, Mr. Katz, no. Currently, our body worn cameras have 30 seconds of buffering. But we know that we could actually, and we've discussed this, I've discussed this with my staff, where we have already made that consideration to actually go to 60 seconds of buffering. What it requires is there's going to be more video, more data that is going to be for storage costs. But beyond that, we are looking to go to 60 seconds of buffering before when the camera actually is activated.
Okay, and so if that involves, it would involve any type of budgetary consideration, even if this were not to go into effect until after this budget, I would hope that we could include whatever is necessary so that we can have the funds to take over, and any new cameras that we're buying would also be following those provisions. And then the other concern that I have is an example for the Senate side. It supersedes local laws. The House side, I think you say in your packet, Mel, that's at this point silent on it. But if the Senate side of that bill, if that provision actually does happen, so at that point, the county would not have any ability at all on any topic on the police law enforcement officers' Bill of Rights or any other provision to have any discussion on it whatsoever. Everything would go through the state. Is that accurate?
I'm going to let Ed take that question.
Yeah, that is one of the differences. The Senate bill has some fairly well contoured differences between what's bargainable and what's preempted and what's not. The House bill does not. So it would depend upon what kind of preemption language is in there. If it's total preemption, then yeah, the county could be totally out of the box. The Senate bill, as I recall, wasn't total preemption. It was preemption on a lot of things, but it left local authority on the investigation and interrogation to fill in the gap, if you will. The House bill is just silent on this altogether. And even the language about collective bargaining is different. It talks about a law enforcement agency can't have a collective bargaining agreement that negates or alters certain requirements, which is language I find a bit loosey-goosey. I mean, negates or alters. Does that mean it could supplement? And supplement doesn't negate. Does that mean it alters if I have, collective bargaining about something else? Don't know. So yes, that could use cleaning up too.
So, and then this will be my last question on this, Mr. President. The whole idea that someone could lose their retirement is, if someone do they have specifics on what that means? If someone has paid in their own funds into the retirement, do they lose that too? How does that work? Their pension.
More
Yeah.
pulling up the provisions as we speak.
I believe that there are provisions in there that allow a payout of individual contributions, if I recall.
I remember it's very narrow. I'll say, and this is towards the end of the bill. First off, it's only going forward. It doesn't apply retroactively. It's only for a pension, from the effective date going forward. I think it was only upon conviction of certain qualifying crimes, like a
Right.
felony or a perjury type crime. I think the court has to make certain findings by clear and convincing evidence, which is a higher bar than normal. So it was a narrow. It's quite a hammer, but it was narrowly tapered in how that hammer could be used.
Okay. Thank you all very much, and I appreciate all your help. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Juano.
Thank you. Can you hear me? You can?
You're a little muted, muffled.
It's probably better.
Better.
I think I need
That's much better.
I got need a new pair of earphones. They've gotten a year's worth of use. And so a couple questions. There's many differences, but between the two discipline procedures, House and Senate, the civilian comprised police accountability board in the House bill, remind me, okay, how that differs from the civilian participation in the Senate bill, or remind the public too, please.
Well, if you mentioned civilian involvement in the Police Accountability Board. So there's civilian involvement in the Police Accountability Board, the Charging Committee, and the Trial Board under the House bill.
Right.
So for the Police Accountability Board, that remains to be seen, because you will establish the membership for the Police Accountability Board. And you'll
Right,
establish
the jurisdiction will.
The particular local jurisdiction, or in
Right.
the case of the state is going to establish the membership of the Police Accountability Board. The Charging Committee, it is a 5-member committee. In terms of civilian involvement there, it's one civilian selected by the Police Accountability Board, but it's also the chair of the Police Accountability Board, whoever that is. I don't know if that could be a civilian, et cetera. And there are 5 members there. So those are potential civilians there. On the trial board, again, it will be one civilian. Well, depends on how you look at it. There would be an active or retired administrative law judge on the trial board, a civilian appointed by the Police Accountability Board, and then a police officer of equal rank.
Okay. And just so our role, the county council and any other local jurisdiction in picking the members of that board is what's the role? I'm a little confused on that piece. Go ahead.
For the Police Accountability Board, the bill has expressed language that says the membership of that board is determined by a local legislative body, but then it requires that board to regularly meet with law enforcement officers to improve policing, to appoint members appoint civilian members to the charging committees and trial boards, to receive complaints of police misconduct and review outcomes. So it specifies some duties, but the membership is left to the local legislative body.
Got it. Okay, that was my reading too. So we would have, because I think it was said, and this is obviously a lot of bouncing balls here. We would have a role in appointing that body, which would be key in the House bill as far as the decision to move forward with discipline. And then the chief still has a role. The chief or sheriff or the head law enforcement officer in that jurisdiction would still have a role to charge or to dole out the discipline once the decision is made whether there should be discipline, right, under the House bill. That's how I'm reading it. Like the chief would. I see you kind of nodding, Ed, or go, Kathleen, or go ahead, either whoever.
Well, I mean, under the bill, the trial board makes, if an officer appeals the decision of the charging committee to the trial board's decisions are final, just final. The chief would implement them.
Right.
Yeah, and the chief doesn't really impose discipline under the House bill like he does or she does under the Senate bill, because under the House bill, the determination of guilt or not is made by this determination whether to charge is made
Right.
by the charging committee, and the charging committee recommends discipline in accordance with the matrix. The chief can increase the discipline, but still has to stay within the matrix. So I'm making this up, but the matrix said you could get between 3 weeks and 6 weeks of suspension, and the charging committee said 3. I guess the chief could take it to the 6 within
Right.
what I'm calling like sentencing guidelines.
Right.
Um,
Okay. That makes sense. I mean, yeah, I think so. It's interesting because, I certainly get the logic of, I think what Mr. Reamer was saying about you have one person who's accountable, having been on this council and, we had a bit of a time, picking our next chief. And that is not an easy process. And I think, there's a lot of discipline that happens. There's very little transparency. I think everything we all agree upon is, very few council members know what actually is happening in regards to discipline, which is a huge problem. But so the ability of us as even elected officials to hold the chief or any head law enforcement officer accountable based on individual discipline decisions, I think that's a very, very difficult task. So one of the things I think is a potential advantage of the House model is that you have more civilian and non-civilian. There are non-civilians, obviously, say ALJ and other law enforcement potentially involved in this board as mandated as what they have to do, the charging committee and the various entities. So I just think that's something. I haven't made a determination, or I know we're not taking any votes. I just want to throw that out there because I think it's difficult, and not just saying our department, but you think about the other jurisdictions. I think might be even a heavier lift to have that person. I think it's not necessarily more accountability in that regard, and certainly not more transparency necessarily. I do think that the shielding, I do like that in the House bill they removed the expungement provision. I don't, again, part of the premise of this, I think from most of us, or certainly from my perspective, was that there should be no extra rights, here, that, if a citizen or another government employee cannot have something shielded after 3 years, a police officer shouldn't have something shielded. I actually think the standard should be higher because of the position of public trust. So I would recommend that when we do take action, if we take action to support provisions or a bill as it moves through the conference, that one I think is better. I have comments on other bills, but I guess I'll stop because we're just talking about the discipline. I want to talk about the independent investigation bill, and I know we haven't gotten there yet, so I'll pause there. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Rice.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
You're good? Okay. Yeah. Folks, we can take any position that the body wants. I don't believe anybody in a conference committee especially is asking for the point of view of the Montgomery County Council. Most state lawmakers, it's past, the point where they have anything to say about this. What comes out of a conference committee is going to be determined by the Speaker, the Senate President, and the chairs of the appropriate committees with jurisdiction and the members of the conference committee. That's about it. Councilmember Raymer.
Well, I think we're underselling our influence here. This board that the House bill creates looks very similar to the Policing Advisory Commission that we enacted. And the Senate discipline model is very close to the legislation that's pending before the Montgomery County Council right now. Mm-hmm. So I think the county has been highly influential, and I believe our team has been part of the conversations.
Absolutely.
So, first of all, I think
it's a totally different question, though, whether the 6 or so members of the conference committee, including the speaker, the appointees of the Speaker and the Senate President, at this point,
I don't know, but I do think we should recognize that we are playing an important role, I think, here in the whole state's conversation.
I think we should all be proud of Montgomery County's contribution to the statewide policy. Absolutely. And this is not the first one.
Now, the only thing I wanted to say just briefly in this thinking out loud, which, I think is unavoidable at this point. I do worry about the board concept is replacing one unaccountable process with another, one unaccountable person with another. You can't, no one can be fired. They don't have to get rehired. They're not subject to public pressure. I think you could see that resulting in bad outcomes in jurisdictions where, that those individuals are appointed, just as much as you might, I think perhaps some would naively hope that it would result in the opposite, where, the civilian, some of the activist community, is hoping that just because there is a civilian, that person would agree with them. I am concerned about, I think accountability is the the secret ingredient here. And so that'll be my guide as I try to figure out which of these I prefer. Is, where do people think that they are immune to pressure or public, ideas, and where are they not? Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Mel, I think we can move on.
Well, I'm going to just ask you a question, Mr. President. Do you want to move to a different topic, or do you want us to go ahead and move through the package, or if people have specific questions about the package, I'm just throwing that out there. But we're glad to go through the package entirely too.
There are no other questions, no additional requests that I have about this topic, but I thought we were just moving through the packet. Councilmember,
Glad to do that. Glad to do that.
I have one comment to make. I'll do it now, just since the independent investigation provision in the House is much, 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 much better. And actually, to your last point, Mr. President, basically what the bill we passed in the LED Act, it would create this independent agency that would take any use of force. It goes a step further, not just death, any serious use of force. And I think we should absolutely, consistent with the action of the first bill we passed in this council, I think that would be a pretty easy one, and it's a pretty of this whole package. It's pretty clear-cut difference, and Melanie or team could expound on that. But I just wanted to point out that it is exactly what I think the chief has also been in favor of too, an independent body that would take these things up.
Right.
Okay. All right. Kathleen, do you want to keep walking through this package?
Sure. So moving to page 6, which is discussing the Maryland Public Information Act and records relating to a complaint and an investigation. You'll recall that from discussing the Senate bill that this relates to the current requirement in the Maryland Public Information Act that personnel records, if there's a request to review personnel records, that must be denied with several caveats, but generally must be denied. Personnel records would not be generally accessible. And included in personnel records at the moment would be complaints against an officer or investigatory records relating to that complaint. Both bills turn that mandatory denial into a discretionary decision to deny or to allow inspection, and incorporate criteria that's in current law to guide that discretion. So they're similar in that way. The House bill does have differences in terms of discretion. It actually requires that an inspection be denied if it relates to an active investigation or contains certain personal information. That would be discretionary under the Senate bill. And it also expressly requires that a custodian allow a state's attorney, the U.S. attorney, attorney general, state prosecutor to have access. So that would be a required inspection. The House bill also creates an interesting mechanism for the current Maryland Public Information Compliance Board. It creates a process whereby if a custodian has a concern that somebody's asking for records in a frivolous manner or with bad faith, that the custodian can go to that current board and ask for essentially permission and order to not have to disclose the records. And so that process is set up. It's in the House bill. It's not in the Senate bill. And this bill takes effect this year on October 1.
Kathleen, I'm a little worried, Kathleen, we're not going to have time for the other topics. So I don't see any other questions about about public safety at this point. And we're 3 weeks from sine die, so we may not want to go
Sure.
through all the differences between the bills since they'll be resolved.
That's fine. We're following your lead, Mr. President.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Great. I'm trying to be responsive to the text I'm getting from my colleagues. Okay. I think we can move ahead. Unless there are, we can probably get to the begin with the Climate Solutions Now Act.
Okay, let's go ahead and do that. Amy, are you ready?
I am ready. Good afternoon, everybody.
Thanks, Kathleen.
We just wanted
You're
to
welcome, sir.
Very
bring
helpful.
to your attention. This is really the only large piece of climate legislation that's actually been moving. The Senate version has moved out of the Senate with a few amendments, which are addressed in the notes there. I was able to work off of that one. And the House bill is still in the House committee, and they are still looking at it. So I'll just walk through the main components of the bills, and if anyone has any questions, just let me know. What this bill will do primarily is increase the statewide greenhouse gas emission reduction requirement. Currently, it's 40% from 2006 levels by 2030, and this will alter it to be 60% from 2006 levels by 2030, and then achieve net zero by 2025. The bill has requirements for energy conservation for buildings. The regulations require new buildings to achieve energy use reductions that exceed the 2018 International Energy Conservation Code, starting 30% for building permits from 2024, and then increasing. Any building permit application received on or after January 1st, 2033 must achieve net zero energy balance. I do want to note that if local governments have more stringent requirements at the time of the building permit, those supersede the state bill. It has an interesting school construction component to it. It requires at least one school in each school system from July 1, 2022 to July 30th, 2030, be constructed to meet net zero energy requirements. And then any other schools need to be solar ready. The component about the net zero schools is subject to funding from the new net zero school loan fund that is set up under the bill. It has requirements for the state vehicle fleet to go to net zero emissions. It has components for in certain circumstances they need to seek alternative fuel if in fact it won't work. They start with the buses and then they move through the passenger and the light duty fleet. Another large component of the bill is it establishes a policy for the state to plant and maintain 5 million sustainable native trees by the end of 2030. And it also adds a program to plant native tree species in underserved areas by making grants for qualified organizations to plant trees in those areas. And then, of course, let's see. And then it makes extensions to certain PSC Commission energy efficiency and conservation programs. And then it also increases the required targeted annual gross energy savings from those programs. There is a local property tax exemption in there for machinery and equipment that is installed that on brownfields, roadways, parking lots. That's part of a community solar project and serves 51% of the kilowatt output for low or moderate income customers. In addition, there's a Commission on Environmental Justice and Sustainability. They are looking at methodologies to identify communities disproportionately affected by climate change, and then they have to report on that at the end of 2022. It also sets up a working group for just transition, employment, and retraining. This is going to be a number of jobs created to counter climate change, and then also really take a look at jobs that are impacted by the transition as well. They also have to report by 2022. And then the funding sources are pulling money from different areas, the Strategic Energy Investment Fund, the Net Zero School Loan Fund that's being established, Bay Restoration, Chesapeake Bay, and Atlantic Coast Bays Trust Fund, and then the Transportation Trust Fund for the vehicles. So like I said, that bill has moved over from the Senate to the House, and expect we'll see them working on that soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. That's terrific. Questions on the Climate Solutions Now Act? Okay. Any other questions for the body, for our team?
Do you want to talk about the budget at all real quickly, or?
Sure, please.
Okay, all right. So the operating budget is across the way. It looks like it will not be controversial because the state is literally swimming in money.
Right.
So everything that was bad, that, like things like the CADE formula was going to be reduced. We were going to pick up the tab again for the state departments of assessments and tax. Independent colleges were hit. Everything's been reversed. So the state did well. They had new revenue estimates. They had their Medicaid enhanced match got taken care of. Again, this is just to put this into context. The state's budget's $50 billion. So it's, so when you talk about numbers, it's a very big budget. But they had revenue write-ups. They had the $3.9 billion and the HR 133 money in December. I mean, things just started to come up roses for them. And as a result, they are able to leave, like, they're above what they are required to do or requested to do by the bond rating agencies. They have 5.6% reserves in the rainy day fund. They have basically eliminated their structural deficit for several years. I mean, this is like unheard of, because almost all public sector entities often carry structural deficits, and they're leaving a lot of cash to the bottom line. So it's, there's a lot of risk out there. As you know, you're about to work on your budget, but that's good news for them. The House put together their capital budget. Just wanted to run through a couple of things that are good for the county. The House put in $10 million for parks and trails. That will be flexible money to spend. They added $5.5 million for I call it the EGRC, the Supplemental Public School Construction Program. I had always mentioned that the Montgomery College Leggett project that was underfunded was fairly easy to resolve, and it has been resolved with an additional amount of money to make that project whole. There's $5.5 million for a Burtonsville garage. There was another $400,000 added for one project that maybe you know a lot more about than I, the Willett Branch Greenway. And then you have the local bond initiative sheet, and that's about $3.2 billion. So some good news there, and we'll see what the Senate does. But again, my guess is a lot of that stuff definitely holds in the Senate. And that's the story from Annapolis.
How much of the $3.2 billion is Montgomery County?
That is Montgomery. That's all Montgomery. So that it's $3.2 million of projects coming out of the House to the benefit of Montgomery.
3.2 million.
Correct.
You said billion.
If I did, I apologize, because
I was getting
otherwise
excited.
we would stop and celebrate right now. But no, it's 3.2 million.
Okay, colleagues, any questions on the budget?
If it was 3.2 billion, we could be like Oprah used to be. You get a school, and you get a park, and you get.
Right. That's right. You get your house rebuilt.
Well, I thought we were going to do a statewide total. Okay. All right. I don't see any questions. I think you've sufficiently educated everybody. Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, look, just let me say that this is a really busy time. Please just feel free to reach out directly to us or to your staff, and we're willing to tell you anything or answer any question you have.
Absolutely. Okay. Happy crossover day. Good to see you all. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.